Okay, good evening and welcome to the Medical Society of Virginia's webinar about building wealth over time, being hosted by our friends at the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. My name is Carolyn McCray. I'm Assistant Vice President for Programs here at the Medical Society of Virginia. I'm very, very fortunate and very happy to welcome Aaron Scheife as our presenter for today's topic. Aaron serves public as an investor communications specialist in the Office of Investor Education and Advocacy at the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. In this role, she conducts outreach and educates consumers in fulfillment of the SEC's mission to inform and protect investors. Prior to joining the SEC, Aaron worked for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, AARP, the North Carolina Bankers Association, and the American Bankers Association. Quite the resume. Aaron earned both her undergraduate and graduate degrees from the University of Virginia. So we've got a Virginia native here with us to share her expertise. Aaron, welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Carolyn, and thank you to the Medical Society of Virginia for having me this evening. I am from Virginia, so I'm really excited to be here with you all from the Commonwealth. I'm focused in the DC area at this time, so I'm coming to you actually from Maryland, but please stay tuned to the webinar. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to build wealth over time. And we'll get started here. Before I really get into it, I just have to share this brief disclaimer that I am from the SEC's Office of Investor Education and Advocacy, and we're providing this information as a service to both potential investors, if you're not there yet, as well as investors. And the presentation's not a statement of official SEC policy, not a legal interpretation. I'm not an attorney, and it's not investment advice. I'm not an investment advisor, but I've been a financial educator now for close to 20 years. And so I'm really excited to share these nuggets of wisdom from the SEC today. So if you're not familiar with us, the Securities and Exchange Commission is the federal regulator for the stock market. So stocks and bonds, mutual funds, exchange traded funds, which if you just thought I was speaking a foreign language, don't worry, I'll explain all of that, as well as your 401k or individual retirement account. We regulate all of that. And so we have a three-part mission at the SEC. The first mission is to protect investors. We want to make sure that you know what you're putting your hard-earned money into, what investments are safe. We regulate investment advisors, broker-dealers, as well as the products themselves. And we do that to maintain a fair, orderly, and efficient market. The securities markets are, of course, extremely complex, and we want to make sure that we've got government oversight. And then we facilitate capital formation. And I always spend a moment on this just because I think it's kind of a unique mission of our agency. We are facilitating capital formation. And so the example that I would give you is, let's say you came up with a brand new type of central line. My best friend's a nurse, so I'm going to use a little medical technology, but I'm about as accurate as an episode of a TV show. So bear with me. But you came up with this new kind of central line. It's an invention. You got a patent for it. It's doing well. Now you need more money because it's in demand. The product's in demand, but you don't have the money available to manufacture thousands and thousands of devices. And so you might have your company go public, meaning you would offer the general public the ability to purchase a small percentage of your company. And when they do that, you get an influx of cash, and then you can produce more widgets or whatever we're talking about. So facilitating capital formation is a very important part of our mission as well. And my part of the mission that I am responsible for is protecting investors. So the Office of Investor Education and Advocacy has a small outreach team, myself, a few of my colleagues who make presentations like this. But the majority of our 70-ish person staff is made up of the investor assistance team. And those are attorneys and government specialists with many years of experience who actually research your questions and help people who are having an issue with either their investment advisor or one of the products that they've invested in. We actually process more than 17,000 complaints and questions each year. And we have a website, investor.gov, which is ranked highly for a federal government website. And so if you go to our website, we actually just launched a new version of this website today on January 15th, which will make search even easier on our site. So if you have a question about something, or if you want to know about, Ponzi schemes, you could type that into our search. Or if you want to know about any scams that are coming up with the LA fires, you could definitely type that in and that will come right up too. We also released something on that today, warning investors that there are going to be scammers who take advantage of things like this. So definitely bookmark investor.gov as you're starting out on your investing journey. What we're going to cover over the next 40 minutes or so is we've talked about what the SEC is already. So we'll move into building wealth through saving and investing. Talk a little bit about planning for retirement as we go through that. And then I always want to share how people can protect themselves against fraud, because it happens to everyone, and we'll get into, it could happen to anyone. And so we'll get into that a little bit later. And then finally, I'll tell you about some SEC resources in addition to our investor.gov website. This is the website. It actually looks a little bit different than this now because it was just refreshed today. But the thing that I want to call your attention to here is this box in the center. Check out your investment professional. Most people are not DIY for their investments. Most people would prefer to have a professional help them. And so if that is something you're going to do, and that's absolutely fine if you're going to hire an investment professional to help you navigate this space, we do encourage you, though, to check out your investment professional before you start working with them. If you already have someone who you're working with, it doesn't hurt to check them out because you can always change it if something comes up that makes you uncomfortable. But I'll give you an example of how this could work. About almost 18 years ago, my mom moved from Virginia. She retired to North Carolina to actually live near her grandchildren. And she needed a new investment advisor. You hear about people, word of mouth, you can do a Google search, you can, drive around and see the different investment companies and look into people that way. But she found someone who was highly recommended and decided to interview him to possibly work with him. She mentioned this to me, and even though I wasn't working for the SEC at that time, I knew about investor.gov, and I encouraged her to look up this investment advisor on investor.gov. She did that, and we actually saw a couple of red flags in his account, in his information, and they were customer complaints from the late 80s and the early 1990s. And so we called him and said, we'd like to work with you, but when we did a background check on you on the SEC website, we found out that, you've had some complaints from your customers. Can you explain that? And he actually said, thank you so much, first of all, for checking into this. He knew it was something that you could do, but said that he hadn't had many other clients or potential clients who had brought this to his attention. And he was able to explain what happened with those customer complaints. He had actually had a child who was in the NICU for a significant period of time. And so a couple of things fell through the cracks during that situation, which was, at least 20 plus years earlier. So my mom decided to go with him anyway, and he's done a great job for her. But you might find, if you look up Jordan Belfort in this database, he's the man from the Wolf of Wall Street movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. That was popular, more than a decade ago now. If you look him up, you'll see that he was banned by the SEC and by another financial regulator from being an investment advisor. So it's important to check in to the people who are going to be handling your life savings, your investment accounts. So what I think is really unique about this population who I'm speaking with today is that you all are in the medical field. You are going to be doctors, maybe you're going to be physician's assistants, but you are in this field where financially you're going to be doing pretty well compared to your average person. And if you're going to be doing well, hopefully you'll be able to buy a home at some point and build wealth that way. That's kind of the American dream, that traditional way of building wealth and building equity. But I also know that you're living in Virginia. There are a lot of areas of this Commonwealth that are quite expensive. And so, life is just expensive. The other thing that's really unique and what we have learned, because you're not the only medical group we speak to a lot of medical schools. And the reason why is you're science people, right? There's a reason why you're on this path versus the path that I am on. I am not a science person. I could never be a medical professional. I'm a little bit more in the numbers and in communications, things like that. You may own your own business someday, and that you may be a part of a practice. You may be working for a hospital system or some other kind of organization, and money might not be your top skill, right? I hope it's not. I hope medicine is your top skill. And so, it's so interesting to me, this group, because what we find is that when we visit with medical students and others in this profession, some of them say, I'm really good at what I do, but I have no idea what to do with my money. Or I've got so much student loan debt from undergrad, from medical school, that it's nearly impossible for me to figure out how I'm going to be able to afford a home, how I'm going to retire. So that's kind of where we come in with this session. So we're not going to talk about home ownership. That's a different life that I had when I was a home ownership educator. But today we're going to be talking about long-term investing. And there is a bit of a roadmap that we can set out for you. And it's only 3 steps, but by no means is it something that we should just, rush through. So we'll spend time talking about paying down high interest debt and living within your means. And then we'll also talk about maybe putting forward an emergency fund so that you don't have to use credit cards and other high interest debt. And then we'll really get into the meat of our conversation about investing. Sometimes when I have groups of high school students or undergraduate college students, I will ask them, what's their money personality? Are you a spender? Are you a saver? Does money stress you out and worry you? Are you risk averse? Do you not want to put your money anywhere but under your mattress because you know exactly where it is then? So that's one fundamental lesson to learn, how you feel about money. The most important foundational lesson, though, is to know and be able to differentiate between needs and wants. So, of course, we need a roof over our head, we need shoes on our feet, clothes on our backs, water, electricity coming through, food to eat. But there are always trade-offs, right? So do we need all of the streaming channels that exist these days? Probably not. Do we need the most expensive car that our salary can afford? Probably not. And so we're going to talk about some ways that you might be able to save a little bit if you're able to um, really take a good look at those needs, meet those, and then move on to your wants. And I'm certainly never going to say don't get things that you want, because um, despite being a financial educator for many years, I am actually a bit of a spender myself. So we just have to know what our personality is and what's important, and what's superfluous, what we can kind of adjust in order to have this healthy financial picture. So here's what we're talking about. This wealth mindset means that you're leaving some room in your budget for investing. So you probably need a car, right? Unless you're living in a major metropolitan area and you can take public transportation, you probably need a car. So are you going to get a brand new car in 2024? Even the least expensive new car this year that just passed was about $40,000. So in that case, that might be a $700 to $900 a month payment, which may not leave a ton of room for saving and investing. But if you're able to get by with a new, or I'm sorry, with a used car, get a good one, get a certified pre-owned or whatever the terminology is. But if you're able to get away with a used car, um, that's half the price. You also bring that monthly payment down, and it allows you to put money into an emergency savings account, to contribute to a 401k, which if you don't know what that is, I'll explain. And then you might have a little extra spending money as well, so that you can get a cup of coffee before you go into the hospital, or before you go on rounds or something like that. So right now you're standing on this rock that's closest to us, and it's in clear focus. You're thinking about the next 2 weeks when you receive that paycheck. But what about that rock that's getting blurry further down the line? That's what we want you to be able to think about. That wealth mindset means making that distinction of, if I buy something today, is it bringing me closer to or farther away from my financial goals? So it's something to think about. And we're not going to think about it every single time, but we'll think about it for important purchases. So as we mentioned, the first step is really to pay down any high interest debt that you have. So obviously you'll have student loans, and so we don't consider that to be high interest debt. We consider this to be consumer spending loans, like a credit card or a short-term loan, something like that. Even in some cases, an auto loan, but not a mortgage, not student loans. Credit card companies charge upwards of 18, 23, 29, even more than that percent interest. So when you make a purchase on a credit card, you are actually signing the dotted line on a mini loan, and you're required to pay that money back. And if you don't pay it back by the end of your billing period, you will be charged interest. That's Interest is charged because you had the privilege of making that purchase without the cash right there in front of you. And so, of course, interest is expensive. We encourage you, if you do have credit card debt, to really focus on paying that balance off or down, and then living within your means. So while you're paying off that credit, don't use that credit card. And in the future, think about when you use it, and try to stay within your budget. A lot of people ask if they should stop investing or not contribute to like a 401k or something like that while they're in the process of paying off debt. The answer will depend on the individual and how much debt you have, of course, but we would say not necessarily. Now, if you can still afford to contribute to a workplace retirement savings program, it's best to continue with that. And I'll explain why. There are a lot of advantages to that 401k investing. Here's another just example of the cost of credit. When you're moving into an apartment, you might need a couch or a TV or a dining room table, something like that when you're first getting started. You can pay for it in cash, or you can charge it to a credit card. You can either pay that credit card off in full, or again, as I mentioned, you can pay that off in steps. One tip that I often share is to think about credit as, will I still have this item when the bill comes due? So I never use credit for food, for concert tickets, for things like that. I don't use credit for consumables, things that won't be there at the end of the month, when the bill comes due, like a pizza, in college, or a nice meal. If you are looking for something like a new couch or a TV or an interview suit, that will be there when that bill comes. And so perhaps it's worth it to buy it on credit, even if it takes a little time to pay that off, like a month or two. So think about it maybe that way. That's how I do it. If you want to avoid using credit altogether, first of all, we'd say that's not always the right answer too, because you need a credit score. You need to establish credit. You need to make sure that companies know that you are able to take credit, use it wisely and responsibly. But if you'd like to really limit your use of credit, start an emergency fund. This is a really key step. If your phone screen cracks, or your tire goes flat, or your dog, like mine's in the background, if she gets sick, um, instead of reaching into your wallet and grabbing that credit card, you can transfer some money over from your emergency savings account. And then you run a better chance of not falling victim to those high interest rates that credit cards can charge. And it doesn't have to be a lot. You can build that up slowly over time, $25 a month. Um, some people say 3 to 6 months of living expenses. That's daunting. So maybe try something like, $1,000 in that emergency account, and then build from there. And then if you do have to dip into it, don't forget to pay that emergency fund back, either over time, or if you can with a tax refund or something like that. So take advantage of those one-time opportunities. If you get graduation money, birthday gift, something like that, you can sock that away into your emergency savings fund. And why can't we just save our money for the future? Well, because inflation. I'm sure you all have, some knowledge of this concept of inflation, where things just get more expensive over time. This is a particularly tough time, although I did see in the news that it's cooling a bit, but things cost more than they used to. When the first iPhone came out, it was $600. This latest iPhone is double that. What I think is interesting about this is it's obviously not just that the iPhone is better, faster, has more functionality and features than that 2007 version, but the cost to make it has gone up. So that's a little bit about inflation. And then our third step in the roadmap to building wealth is really this very important piece that we'll spend quite a bit more time on, which is investing for the long term. So there's a super powerful formula, which is regular investing plus time equals wealth. So if you start investing as soon as you get your first job, and I mean, let's all look in our rearview mirror. The first job you got might have been at 16, 17, 18 years old. You could actually have started investing then. And if you did, then, I'm applauding you here. But start investing as soon as you can, and then keep that going, whether the markets are up or down. And I'll explain more about that. Investments grow through compounding. So If you've ever seen, we just passed the holiday season, if you were able to catch How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the cartoon version, on TV over the holidays, you might have seen that scene where the dog gets caught in the snowball and it rolls and the snowball just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Investments grow in that same way. Every time you contribute and you earn a return on your investment, that amount is added, and then you earn a return on that investment. So plus what you've earned. So it just keeps building. Sometimes it's little by little, but it does add up. And you can invest in a couple of different types of products. The one that most people think about are stocks, right? This is when you actually own a piece of a public company. Maybe you like Nike or Amazon, Apple, Sephora, Peloton, something like that, some very recognizable consumer brand. Other stocks that you can purchase can be things like Home Depot or your electric company, if it's a public company, uh, real estate companies, sometimes medical companies as well, pharmaceuticals, these are huge. So what you do is you actually own a piece of that company, and as the share prices increase, you might get a little bit of money back from that company, and you can reinvest that money, which is called a dividend. So you're actually loaning the company money so that they can make more of their product. And when they make more of their product and it sells and they earn money, they pass that along to their shareholders. Now, what happens if they don't make money on their product? Joanne Fabric, Kmart, Big Lots is going out of business, I saw. That means that they didn't make a profit. And if you owned stock in Big Lots, you lost money because you were loaning them money and they weren't able to pay that back. And so you lose money in that way. Bonds are things like Treasury security, Treasury savings bonds, or bonds from local, state, or federal government would be the Treasury savings bonds. Some companies also issue bonds, and so they do pay interest, and they do return your principal at the end of the bond period. A good example of this is, several months ago, we had an election. If you voted in that election, you may have noticed that there were probably bond referenda on the ballot. You were supposed to decide whether or not you wanted to vote for a new library or a new park. Transportation infrastructure is another one. And so if you voted yes, you can put forward a bond on this. It might mean that your county or your city would be offering bonds for purchase. So real residents of those communities could purchase and then help pay for some of these things, and then they'd get their money back after a period of time. And then funds are we're going to talk more about these because these are for the layperson, the person who doesn't know much about investing. These are often a really good option. Funds are like Standard & Poor's 500 or the Dow Jones, things where there are a lot of different companies and you get all of those in one little basket. So it's almost like a buffet. You're putting a little bit of this company, a little bit of that company. It's predetermined for you. So you're not actually choosing it. But maybe you are getting in that S&P 500. That means you own a fraction of the 500 most profitable public companies. And so when they do well, you do well. And we'll look at an illustration of this. So those are mutual funds, exchange traded funds, and those are a helpful thing to invest in. So as I mentioned, I wanted to share with you an example of how investing really works by compounding. So let's say you are going to save $100 every month for a 40-year career. You have a couple of options. You can put it underneath the mattress. That's not the best place for it. Maybe if someone breaks into your house, that might be one of the first places they look. They'll steal that cash. If your house, has some kind of a flood or fire or something, that money would be gone. You can put that money in the bank in a savings account. You might earn about 1% interest in a traditional savings account at this time. That's great because your money is safe. It's insured by the federal government. They insure money that you keep at a bank or a credit union up to $250,000. So you can keep your money there. If you put in $48,000, you will get up to about $58,800. So you'll get there eventually. You will earn about, a little more than $10,000. If you put your money into an investment account and you assume about a 7% rate of return, that $48,000 becomes almost $200,000 more over that 40 years. You have to keep it in and you have to keep contributing, but that's where you're really going to see the compound interest showing off. But it's not going to be that smooth curve that you just saw. This is not quite 40 years, it's 30 years, but this is stock market performance over 30 years. And you can see that it does, whoops, and I'm going to actually use the red pen here because you can see that it starts down here and over time it does go up. So obviously, as I mentioned, it's not a smooth curve. There are some dips here. This was in the early 2000s. This is like aftermath of 9/11. You'll see here there was a big dip. This was 2007, 2008, that recession that happened when the housing bubble burst. This one here is right around the pandemic, but see how we've rebounded. And if we had continued this today, it would be even a little bit higher. So that is, again, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be there for you. Okay, so let me turn that off. And then we can move back into our, okay. So, and now I have this weird laser pointer. So what we've got here is the power of starting early. So if you want to reach $500,000 by retirement, which is, quite frankly, not enough. But if you want to get there by the age of 65, having $500,000 in an investment account, you'll need to invest at age 18, $127 a month. So that would have been the right time to start. The next right time is today, by the way. Age 25, that person will have to save about $200 a month. At this point in my life, I would need to save almost $1,000 a month to get to $500,000 in 20 years. Again, if you have 40 years, that amount that you have to put in is a little bit less. It's a lot less. Investments do have risk. As I mentioned, when you put your money into the savings account at a bank or credit union, it's insured by the federal government. The Securities and Exchange Commission doesn't insure your investments. We know that investments come with risk. That's just the way the market works, the securities market. However, there is a bit of insurance that can be purchased, and we won't be talking about that during this webinar. But I want to talk a little bit about risk because the higher the risk, the higher the return. Again, if you want to put that cash under your bed or in a bank account, you're going to get a lower return but it is that low risk. If you're able to take on a little bit more risk, invest in bonds, government, municipal, corporate bonds. Bond funds are also a basket of different bonds that you can purchase. Those are a little bit more risk, a little bit more return. So that's like your medium term goals. For long term goals like retirement, you are going to want to put that investment into stocks, bonds, I'm sorry, stocks and stock funds like a mutual fund or an exchange traded fund. And here's why. This is a good example of someone who is going to retire. They've got some money in cash, some money in bonds, and some money in stock. In that stock piece of their investment pie, they are diversifying by investing some in the financial sector. So maybe they've got stock from Bank of America, Truist, Wells Fargo. Industrial sector, they might have, companies that are really making things out in the public. The healthcare sector, they are going to be investing in maybe pharmaceuticals there. Tech sector is going to be like Apple. And then the consumer goods might be Amazon or Sephora, Nike, things like that. So that's a way to diversify. So not only are you allocating your assets in different risk profiles, but you're also within that stock piece, you're diversifying. And here is why diversification is so important. You're not putting all of your eggs into one basket. Like, let's say you really believe in what Eli Lilly is doing. They've got a drug that's coming out that's going to be really important to your work as a physician. Um, if you put all your money in that and just buy stock in Eli Lilly, what if something happens and that stock price decreases? So if you diversify, that means that your investments are spread among different companies, sectors, asset classes, as I mentioned. And if a company or industry loses money, your other investments might help balance that out. And here's an example of that. So this is a snapshot of the S&P 500 on Friday, October 4th, 2024. So you'll probably note some things here like Microsoft, Apple, NVIDIA, Google, Meta, Amazon, Tesla. In the energy sector, it's probably too hard to see, but there are some utility companies down there. There's real estate. He's an industrial. So just as you take a look at this financial, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, there's some red here. That means that those companies lost money that day. There's a lot of green here. That means those companies' stock prices went up and they earned money that day. It's interesting, see what you think here, but does the green balance out the red? Or is the red, and the brighter the red, the more they lost, is the red more? Is the green more? What you'll find is that on this day, this person was ahead by 0.34%. So they had a very, very modest gain this day. But looking at this, you might not be able to tell. What if they just owned Home Depot stock? They would have been down 1.84%. So it's helpful when you do have an index fund because it has just so many different ways of balancing things out for you, which is why they're so popular. Now, I'm not telling you what to invest in here, but we are talking about these really good attributes to make good investments. So we're going to talk now about employer matches and tax breaks, but diversification is what we've just discussed. One thing you can do is to build wealth through your job. And this is where we're getting into the planning for retirement piece of our agenda. So contributions to a 401k or a 403b or whatever they call the workplace retirement savings program where you're employed, that contribution has tax advantages. If you put the money into a traditional account, it means that you don't have to pay taxes on it. It lowers your taxable income. Your employer may match this as well. I'm very lucky in that working for the federal government means that my match on my workplace retirement savings program is pretty good, I have to say. 6 or 8%, depending on how much you're able to put in. That's free money. That money is something that your employer is contributing for you. If you can contribute up to what they will match, that means you are getting the money you've put in as well as the money they're putting in. And of course, you can put above what they would match as well. Your 401k or 403b stays with you, even if you leave that hospital system or that other job that provides some kind of 401k. And you can see here that there are a lot of different types of companies that offer these plans. If you are maybe not working for somewhere that offers a 401k or 403b plan, maybe you're on your own, you're starting up your own practice or joining a small practice and they don't have this yet, there is another way that you can save for retirement and invest for retirement, and that's through an individual retirement account. Anyone can open one of these as well. I can. If you have a child who's at least, working and earning a living at age 16, they can actually contribute to an IRA, and non-working spouses can as well, which is pretty cool. So you can contribute up to $7,000 per year in an individual retirement account. And you can set them up with virtually any financial institution that offers them. It's super easy to do these days and doesn't take much, honestly, a pretty small investment to open one of those. As I mentioned, it can lower your taxable income. So that's the traditional way of contributing to either an IRA or a 401k or other type of program. So in that case, like I said, money goes in before taxes, it lowers your taxable income. Maybe, if you're able to contribute $10,000 and you make $60,000, then your taxable income goes down to $50,000. But your money will be taxed when you withdraw it. So you're kind of doing yourself a favor now, but not so much your future self. The Roth way of contributing to these accounts means that your money goes in after taxes. So in this case, your money will be tax-free when you withdraw it later in life. So it's a really individual decision. So, and it depends on a bunch of factors. A lot of people contribute to both at the same time because you can do that. There are limits to what you can contribute. If you have an employer-sponsored plan, you can contribute $23,500 a year. That's just you. Your employer could contribute as well, and that would not count against this $23,500 limit. If you're older than 50, and if you're older than 60, you can contribute even more. If you're contributing to an IRA, you can contribute $7,000, and if you're a little bit older, you can contribute even more. But what happens when you leave that job? You can actually do a couple of different things with your employer-sponsored plan money. It's your money, including the money that your employer put in. They might make you wait a year or two to vest, but it's your money. So if you're able to take all of that, you can leave it there in that prior company's account. You can put it into a new employer's account, rolling it over into, maybe you're changing from one hospital to another. You can roll it into that new hospital's account. You can also take this money and roll it into an individual retirement account. So that's very easy to do. What you can do, but we strongly encourage, and this is like the only piece of advice I would give, is we strongly encourage you not to take a lump sum distribution, or I guess I would strongly warn you against that. Because there are a lot of taxes and penalties that come along with that if you're withdrawing that money before age 59 and a half. So you could lose maybe even as much as half of your investment by taking that money out. It also stops from increasing by compound interest. So you're doing yourself kind of a disservice if you take that lump sum. Fees were mentioned on the slide where we said we would mention a couple of things that make good investments. If you have a 401k plan, if you have an individual retirement account, a mutual fund, and you've got a few shares of that, find out what the fees are because those fees can eat up your money over time. Um, if you are investing in something like an index fund, like the S&P 500, um, the fees on that are going to be a bit lower than if you have a financial advisor working for you doing stock picking every day. So keep that in mind. Um, and there is a tool that you can actually use on the FINRA website, which is another securities regulator who we're tied in with. You can find out how much the fees are. So our general point here is that you can get rich slowly. Slow and steady wins the retirement savings race. So there are more than 150,000 people who have $1 million or more in their federal government 401k program. And that's exciting because federal employees are making a decent living, but, not as much as some other professions. So you really can, if you participate from the beginning of your career, you can really grow that account over time by taking advantage of the employer match, by contributing as much as you can, up to that 23,500 if possible. Contribute consistently, whether the stock market is during one of those up periods or one of the down periods, contributing over your entire career, however long that may be. And then using that asset allocation, that diversification strategy that makes the most sense for your particular situation. I'm in my 40s now. I've got probably at least another 20 years until retirement. I'm not going to be able to assume as much risk as my 23-year-old niece who started her first job out of college a few months ago. She's got a lot more time in the game than I do, so she can afford to be a little bit riskier with her investment. There are some alternative investments. And as you amass wealth and if you do really, really well in your career, you may be encouraged to invest in private equity, hedge funds, or commodities. Um, those are, at times very profitable investments as well. Sometimes they have high fees associated with them, and typically they are pretty complex. You're going to probably have an advisor working with you on those. Some are limited, like you have to make a certain amount or have a certain amount of net growth or net earnings, net wealth to participate in those programs. But they're usually a little bit riskier, in some cases a lot riskier. And then it's not always easy to get out of them like it would be if you just sold your shares of a mutual fund. So we do have a couple of tips to avoid fraud as you're moving along. Um, if it sounds too good to be true, or if it gives you just a weird feeling in your gut, stop and think. Stop and think. Do your research is the number one thing we can say. Take your time. Be careful, especially be careful if you're asked to pay for an investment with cryptocurrency or gift cards or an overseas wire transfer. Don't be pressured to buy quickly. anyone who says you have to tell me if you want to buy into this investment by the end of the day today, be very suspicious of that because there should not be any limited time offers in investing. Take time, like I said, to research. Are romance and relationship confidence scams or relationship investment scams. This is a situation where it might start with a social media message or a wrong number text. And then, as it turns out, you end up developing a relationship with someone who likely is not real or is a team of people working to defraud you. They may encourage you to invest in crypto assets or something else that may honestly be completely bogus. And you may end up losing your money that way. So, when a scam like this does blow up, it's potentially financially and psychologically devastating. I'm sure some of you know the impact that money troubles can have on a physical and mental well being. Um, Sometimes there's even almost a double dip or a triple dip on this scam, where there are opportunities for the scammer to continue to take advantage of you or the team of scammers. So keep an eye out for those. The other one that I want to tell you about, because you're part of a group, you're physicians, you're working in the medical field, um, you may be targeted by people who are going to take advantage of that affinity, that common bond that they may have with you, or that they say they have, but they really don't. A good example of this is actually with my place of work, the federal government. There was an SEC enforcement case brought against a company who said they were endorsed by the federal government and to be an investment advisory firm for federal employees specifically. They weren't. And so the federal employees who invested in that group were taken advantage of, but they felt they could trust this person because they said they were a part of this recognizable group that we are a part of as federal employees. So even if you know someone making the investment offer, always do your research. Um, and the person who tells you about the investment opportunity might be a victim themselves and they just don't know it yet. So, as I mentioned, do your homework. If you are someone who, likes to look at TikTok, at least until it's no longer, it might be banned soon. But if you look at social media or these finfluencers, these financial influencers, check to see if they're registered on investor.gov. Um, some legitimate investors, investment advisors may send out like newsletters that tell you a little bit about what is going on in the current market, but others may be looking for target that they can present fraudulent investments to. So just keep an eye out for that. So to sum up what we've discussed this evening, and it's been a lot, uh, spend less to free up room to save and invest. Pay down that high interest debt. And then once you have, and while you're paying that off, live within your means. Setting up, I didn't mention this, I don't think, but setting up automatic contributions through your payroll deduction to an emergency fund is a great idea. But you can also set something up within your own bank to automatically pull some of that money over into your emergency fund, as well as into those long term investments. Start contributing to your workplace retirement savings program just as soon as you can, and then continue to do it over the lifetime of your career. Do your research, be a wise and informed investor. And if you know that it's not your thing, find a reputable person to give you some help so that you don't experience something like a scam. And you can always reach out to us. You can find me at outreach@sec.gov. And then if you have a question, our team of investor assistants, attorneys, and specialists would love for you to go to help.sec.gov. That's a web form where you can fill out your problem and they'll reach back out to you. You can also report suspected securities fraud if you have witnessed that by going to our tips, complaints, and reporting website. And I think that's it. Carolyn, I know this was a lot, so I'll hand it back over to you.
Erin, thank you so, so much for that wealth of information, pun intended. We really appreciate you being here with us this evening. This was wonderful information for those of us who are just starting out with our investment journey, as well as a welcome refresher for those of us who have been working for a little bit on our investment options. So thank you so much for reviewing all of these different resources and tools and strategies for those of us who needed those reminders for sure. On behalf of the Medical Society of Virginia, just want to thank you again for your time. Thank you to everyone who joined in today. If you do have specific questions for Erin, you can use the Q&A function. We will stop the recording before we get to the questions and answers. And if you have additional questions or want additional resources, please don't hesitate to use the resources from the SEC that you see on your screen here. And this is the very first open Wealth Haven webinar that the Medical Society is offering to our members. We will have more and more resources that we start building up throughout 2025. And if you want to keep up to date with what those resources are, you can visit msv.org/programs/wealthhaven. So thank you all so much again for joining us. Erin, thank you again. And it was such a pleasure having you here today.
Thank you so much.